Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Kunce, a Marine veteran looking to unseat Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. Kunce, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here, Brittany.
You're running for Missouri Senator Josh Hawley's seat in the 2024 election. You've been described as a populist. You call yourself a different kind of Democrat. Can you walk us through what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, I think people sometimes run away from this populist label because it's been given or taken, I would say, by people like Josh Hawley, right? These frauds and these fakers who only care about power for themselves. That's something you saw on January 6th, a couple years ago when he raised his fist and incited a crowd when he thought it was going to get him some power. And then the moment things got real, he's skittering out the back door and running away. And so what I want to do is I want to embrace what I believe real populism is, and that's taking power back for everyday people, taking it away from these massive corporations that are funding campaigns like Josh Hawley's in the past, taking them away from politicians like Josh Hawley who don't want to help us out, who don't want to make our lives better, but who want to control us. I mean, he wants to control us in the bedroom, he wants to control us in the doctor's office, he wants to control us in the workplace. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but he's even got this new book out called Manhood, where he tries to control what it means to be a man, which apparently, according to him, is to like make yourself in his image. And so, for me, populism is about embracing, empowering everyday people, so that we can make decisions for our own lives. Because I think we know how to do that best.
I do want to touch on a few points that you made here. You actually announced your campaign on January 6th of this year, the 2 year anniversary of the Capitol insurrection in 2021. Why was this so important to you?
Well, it's important to me because it's just the day that he showed everyone what a fraud and a coward he is. I mean, I was in the Marine Corps. I spent 13 years. I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can tell you right now, if any of us had shown that type of cowardice, we'd have been court-martialed. Like the guy is just a fraud and a phony. And that was our opportunity to just remind everybody what he truly is, a guy who only cares about power for himself.
Let's go back from the beginning here. You mentioned your time in the Marine Corps. You spent 13 years as a Marine. You're a Marine veteran. What compelled you to serve A? And B, how did that prepare you for this moment now running for the Senate?
I grew up in mid-Missouri, in a medium-sized town, and it was the perfect place to live, right? All of us kids running in and out of each other's houses, everybody in that neighborhood taking care of each other. And one of the interesting things about that neighborhood is it was so magical, despite the fact that none of us really had any money. I mean, like my parents got married young at 19 and 22. They had four kids. We were living paycheck to paycheck, and so was everybody in that neighborhood, and yet it was still a magical place. And even I don't think I realized that when I was really little, but when I got older and my littlest sister was born, she had to have an open heart surgery. And if you know anything about what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck in this country, that's absolutely devastating, right? Anytime medical bills hit, your boiler goes out, your car breaks down, if you're living on the edge, you can't make it. And our family, we went bankrupt from that. I remember my mom crying herself to sleep every night, not just because she didn't know if her little girl was going to survive, but because she didn't know if they were going to be able to take care of the rest of us. But ultimately, they were. And it's because the people in that neighborhood, people without any more money than we had, frankly, they passed the plate down at their churches for us. They brought more tuna casserole by the house than we could ever eat. And they really, really took care of us. And so for me, it just showed me what people in this country can do, the way they can take care of each other when they have the right resources. When politicians like Josh Hawley aren't leaving them behind, stripping our communities for parts. If you go back to that neighborhood now, the first house I lived in is an empty lot. The one I joined the Marine Corps out of's got no windows in it. The corner store was boarded up because it was robbed so many times that it couldn't get insurance. And so it was just absolutely devastating for me to watch our country spend billions of dollars overseas while I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that neighborhood fall apart. I signed up to serve that neighborhood, to serve the people there who took care of each other, and that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. This is our opportunity to invest in neighborhoods like that again. If we can just get everyday people back into the U.S. Senate, and so I think that time in the Marine Corps it prepared me well because I can tell you right now, a campaign for office is grueling. People don't always realize it, but it's you start work from the day you wake up or from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep, and that's what it was like in the Marine Corps. I went through all the training. I led a police training team in Iraq. where my role was to plan missions and then lead missions for 12 Marines and a Navy corpsman and get them home safe. Every day. That's a real burden. It's a real honor to have. I'm proud I was able to do it, but it really it shouldered me with heavy responsibility early on in my life in a way that I understand what I'm doing right now and I understand how critical it is, and I'm willing to put in the work.
I do want to talk about a point that you made. It sounds like you had amazing neighbors that really rallied behind you and your family in a time of crisis. But what you touched on is a reality for many Americans living paycheck to paycheck, one disaster away, really, from bankruptcy. And I want to talk specifically about some issues. According to a March 2023 poll from The Economist and YouGov, these are five of the most important issues facing Americans now: healthcare, jobs and the economy, national security, inflation and prices, and crime. So, what would you do to specifically work on these issues, and which ones matter to the people of Missouri the most?
Well, for us, it's about having control over our lives and the resources to make the decisions that we need to make to run our lives the way we want to run them, right? And what you've seen is you've seen politicians really from both sides of the aisle, but I mean, Josh Hawley's been a really terrible example of this, taking a lot of money from the wrong people and using that money to destroy our ability to take care of ourselves. You know, when he was our attorney general, he led a lawsuit to make sure that Missourians couldn't get overtime pay. Like, talk about stabbing working class people in my old neighborhood in the back. I mean, one of the ways that we really are able to try to just squeak out ahead of being paycheck to paycheck is by getting overtime pay. He just does thing after thing like that for his big donors and doesn't take care of us. And so for me, one of the most important things about my campaign, one of the things that I think is most broken in Washington and our politics, is who funds the campaign. And so in my campaign, I take no money from federal lobbyists. I take no money from corporate PACs. I take no money from big pharma executives, no money from big fossil fuel executives, none from these people who I believe are forcing our politicians or convincing them to make decisions that don't work for the rest of us and leave neighborhoods like the one I grew up in behind. Leave us in situations. I mean, you mentioned crime, like my old neighborhood. The lack of opportunity there is the reason why that gas station, the corner store we used to go to, has been robbed so many times was robbed so many times that it couldn't get insurance to stay open anymore, right? These are the type of things that we have failed everyday Americans on, and I believe it's because who runs our campaigns. And so for me, corruption and campaigning is the top issue that can help us get ahead of all of these things. And Josh Hawley is one of the worst career sort of corrupt politicians that we have.
You mentioned you have a grassroots campaign. Let's fast forward to just last year. You lost the Democratic primary for Missouri's open Senate seat. This is now your second campaign. So, what did you learn from that experience?
I think I just learned how hard it is for an everyday person. You know, I got no family money, no political connections. I mean, it's not like my parents suddenly got rich, right? When my mom got cancer a few years ago, she was working an hourly job and she wasn't able to afford it anymore and had to move in with me. That's how we have to take care of each other out here in normal America. And so for me, what I learned is that if you live in normal America and that's where you come from, like politics is often inaccessible. You either have to sell out early or you have to be born with money to make it. And those are two things that I refuse to do. Like I refuse to sell out. And so what we learned to do in that first campaign was how to raise money the right way. We built a record breaking grassroots fundraising movement. And this year, that's really shown. I mean, we raised $1.1 million in the first 3 months of this year. That's more than any Democrat or Republican has ever raised at that point in a campaign before. It's letting us get our message out there and really do things the right way. Because the only people that I ever want to owe in my campaign are everyday Missourians, like the ones who took care of me and my family when we went bankrupt. And what we learned in that first campaign was how to make it so that that's the way it will only ever be.
I'm hearing some themes from you, common themes. You're saying everyday people, normal Americans, things like that. Would you characterize yourself as a moderate Democrat?
No, I characterize myself as a populist. For me, a lot of people try to put you on this spectrum where it's like far left, right, somewhere in the middle, moderate, progressive, whatever else. For me, this is a top bottom campaign. This is about everyday Americans coming together to go against the system and a set of people who don't care about them and have been just leaving our communities behind. So, whenever I get asked if I can embrace the label, I'm going with populist. I want to take that label back because I think it's the right thing. We have to fundamentally change who has power in this country, and we have to empower everyday people to take care of each other again.
Sure, you're labeling yourself as a populist. So, is there anyone right now, any politician in the Senate, in the House, that you could look to and say, hey, they match my views most?
Well, I really, I'm going to cheat on this question because I live in Independence, and right down the street from me is Harry Truman's house. And so for me, when Harry Truman was in the Senate, and then when he was the president, he was a true populist right here from Missouri. He took care of everyday people. He fought for everyday people. He did things like integrate the military. And so for me, that's who I really like. Currently, I think Sherrod Brown's great, John Tester. Again, some of these people who have a real anti-monopoly sort of focused and go against some of the massive corporations, at least some of the time, that are doing us dirty.
You mentioned Harry Truman. ABC and Washington Post actually just came out with a poll last month in May that President Biden is currently polling at 36% approval rating. That is the lowest approval rating since Harry Truman when they started taking this poll. So I'm just going to ask you point blank, do you support President Biden's reelection bid?
Look, sometimes when you make hard decisions and you take care of everyday people, the media comes after you, right? That's what happened to Harry Truman. I mean, Harry Truman made a real decision to sacrifice the South. He by integrating the military, he knew it was going to cost him the South. He knew it was going to be highly unpopular. And then in 1948, he won in a surprise anyway over Dewey, right? He still won because he did the right thing and people were there with him. I really appreciate some of the things President Biden's done. I mean, he has made the decision to invest in our country again. It was unpopular when he pulled out Afghanistan. I don't understand why. We needed to pull out of Afghanistan 20 years ago. I'm telling you, I went there twice. The Marine Corps taught me Pashto. I could speak with people in that country. I knew what was going on there. And the fact that we stayed as long as we did and spent trillions of dollars over there rather than investing here in our country is an absolute tragedy. And so for me, sometimes when you make unpopular decisions, even though they're the right decision, you get a little bit of blowback for that. And so, I liked what Truman did, and a lot of these things that the president's done have been good too.
It sounds like you're a little shy of saying, yes, you do support his reelection, but you do support some of what President Biden's saying. So would you accept an endorsement from President Biden?
Well, I don't even know if I'm on these guys' radar yet, right? What I'm doing right now is I'm just focusing on my race here in Missouri. I'm focusing on everyday Missourians. I'm focusing on the people that are most important to me, and that's not DC politicians. When I'm looking for endorsements right now, that's not who I'm going to. I'm going to local unions. So, I've gotten a bunch of union endorsements. Yesterday, the St. Louis Building and Trades group endorsed me. The KC Buildings and Trades endorsed a few weeks ago. The state firefighters endorsed about a week and a half ago. And so for me, those are people who represent everyday Missourians. I'm not interested in getting DC endorsements. That's just seems like kind of not what I meant. That's not my thing. What I want is everyday Missourians. I'm really proud to get the firefighters endorsement. And this shows just sort of the competitiveness and the viability of this race. The firefighters are endorsing the Republican for governor. They endorsed Eric Schmidt, who's our current Republican senator, and they endorsed our previous Republican senator, Roy Blunt. And yet they've endorsed me because they've seen the way that Hawley treats everyday working people. They've seen the way that he's left our state behind, and they like my record of service, 13 years in the Marine Corps, and where I come from. And so for me, those are the types of endorsements I'm looking for.
Let's talk about that a little bit because the firefighters endorsed a Republican in the past. They're endorsing a Republican for governor now, and they're endorsing you. Why do you think you can appeal to both Democrats and Republicans?
Because I want to fundamentally change who has power in this country. I have seen it. I grew up under a situation like most people in Missouri grew up under. It's really sad to think that most Missourians are paycheck to paycheck, but that's the God's honest truth. And we need to change that. We need people in Congress who understand that. And so when working people know where I come from and they see that I didn't sell out when I first got the chance, right? Like, what did Josh Hawley do when he graduated from school? He went to DC and worked in one of the fanciest corporate law firms that does lobbying in the entire country. I joined the United States Marine Corps. I did 13 years. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then I helped with arms control negotiations out of the Pentagon for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Like, I have a lifetime of service and a background that shows I'll make decisions that take care of everyday Missourians. Josh Hawley, he doesn't understand. He's a rich banker's kid. He's never cared about Missouri. He's never brought any money to our state, and he just doesn't take care of us. And so, for people in this state, we're willing to switch our votes on the ticket, right? This is one of those split ticket voter states. When Donald Trump won by 17 points in 2016, the biggest Republican victory in the state up to that point in all time, Jason Kander, another veteran like me, a veteran of Afghanistan, came within 2.7 points of winning. And so, Missourians here, we're going to vote for the guy, and it gives us a real opportunity to win. And some of these endorsements, like the firefighters, just show that I have an appeal that Josh Hawley doesn't have.
Missouri, as of right now, is a pretty red state. It has 8 congressional districts, as you know, 6 of which are represented by Republicans in the House. We have both senators as Republicans as well as a Republican governor. So, how specifically do you think within the next year and a half you will flip this seat?
Absolutely. I mean, again, Missouri has a history of switching its votes. So up until 2017, most of our statewide elected office holders were Democrats, our governor, secretary of state, kind of all down the line. We only lost our last statewide Democrat this year. She decided not to run for reelection. And so, in 2023 was when our last statewide Democrat left. We have a history of people voting for both sides. We have a history of Democrats winning statewide office in this state, even as recently as 2018. Not every state has that. We have a history of very populist, I would call them ballot measures passing. So in the last several years, our unions got together and overturned the anti-union right to work legislation that Josh Hawley supports, by the way. He's a pro right to work guy. We overturned that 68% to 32% at the ballot box. We increased the minimum wage by $5 over the federal level at the ballot box. We expanded Medicaid. We passed medical and then recreational marijuana. We've done a lot of things to take care of ourselves here in this state. We have a streak where people have been trying to take back power for themselves, take back control. Josh Hawley stands against every single one of those things, and I don't. And so what we have is a real opportunity with a true contact contrast. People who are willing to switch votes on their ticket based on the person rather than the party, and a very unpopular incumbent. I mean, Josh Hawley's underwater right now. His approval rating is lower than his disapproval rating, which for a Republican here is like, that's an achievement. And he achieved that just based on being himself, And so as long as he keeps being himself and I get out there, we're going to win this thing.
I do want to talk about your newest campaign ad that you released. I believe it was last week, narrated by Missouri native John Hamm, a famous actor. And he really laid out the points that you're making here between the differences between Josh Hawley as well as yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about the ad?
Yeah, I mean, so Josh Hawley has this book out called Manhood, where he tells everybody that to be a real man, you got to be more like him. We know, which is crazy ironic considering you see the guy skittering out of the back of the Capitol. But John and I both saw that and thought that we needed to push back against that. Right there is a real problem with these frauds, these fakers, these cowards, just trying to control everybody's vision of what it means to be a man, talking about a masculinity crisis, and really just trying to go after the same people that they've been betraying and destroying for generations. And so, John wanted to get out there, and I wanted to get out there and make that contrast, remind everyone that Josh Hawley uh, doesn't have any standing to talk on this issue. He doesn't care about everyday people. I mean, one of his main points here is that like women in the workplace are destroying men, right? It's crazy. It's not a zero sum game. There's room for everyone to grow and achieve in this country. And the fact that he doesn't believe that, we can't just let that out there. We can't just let him take this territory and talk about it and not answer it. So our job and our desire was to answer that hard. I mean, we want to punch this guy in the face over and over again on all of his silly BS. And so that's the first step of doing that. We put out an ad on January 6th when we launched that did the same thing. And we're going to continue to do that all the way through the end of the election because the people of Missouri deserve to know the difference between the two of us and just what a fraud the guy is.
A panel on Morning Joe on MSNBC called the ad powerful, but I do want to talk about some comments from Kyle Plotkin. He served as Hawley's chief of staff. He told the Springfield News Leader this: Hollywood wants to buy this Senate seat from the people of Missouri, and we expect millions of dollars to pour in from California and New York to support their preferred woke candidate. When you hear that, when you hear him calling you a woke candidate, what's your response? What's your response to his characterization of that ad?
Oh, I mean, it's just more gaslighting, right? Like these guys are scared. They've seen his numbers. They know they're in a bad position. They know they're having a hard time raising money. And to characterize John Hamm as Hollywood elite is ridiculous. The guy's from St. Louis, Missouri. His family's from St. Genevieve, Missouri, and he grew up in North County. Josh Hawley doesn't even know what these places are. When Josh Hawley wanted to bet a Missouri barbecue with JD Vance over the AFC Championship game, Chiefs versus Bills, he bet Kansas barbecue because he typed into Google Kansas City barbecue and didn't know the difference between an establishment in Missouri and Kansas. Like, if anyone's an elite out of touch jerk here, it's Josh Hawley. And that's what we're going to remind people every single day. And the way that they respond to this just shows how scared they are. And it just lights us on fire because we know that he's vulnerable. And every time that they get scared and they say something like this, it's just a reminder to everyone that Josh Hawley's vulnerable. People know he's a fraud and a coward, and it's an opportunity for us to win the seat.
Lucas, you alluded to the fact earlier that a campaign is rigorous work. Right now, as we sit here, we are about a year and a half out from 2024 election night. What's next for your campaign?
I mean, it's what it is every single day, meeting as many everyday Missourians as we can, letting them know my background, telling them about me, hearing what they need, hearing what's difficult in their lives, and just getting around the state. It's what I enjoy doing the most. I try to do it every single day I get a chance, and I'm just happy that the people of Missouri have been so receptive so far.
Lucas Coons, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.